to get started. So let's do that. And let's see, Bobby will go through the housekeeping rules first.
Okay. So just as a reminder, the meeting is being broadcast and recorded on the City of Lawrence YouTube channel. The public chat function has been disabled, and all chats will go directly to me. When you are not participating in the meeting, please mute your microphone. When you are participating in the meeting, please keep your video on. When you're not participating in the meeting, please turn your video off. You will still be able to hear the meeting, and you can turn your video back on when you are participating. Turning the video off when you are not participating allows the active meeting participants to be seen on the screen. If you have any trouble, please send me a chat. The city reserves the right to mute microphones and/or turn off people's video to minimize distractions. Please remember to state your name every time you speak for the benefit of those listening remotely. Chair Nalbandian, if a motion is made and seconded, please call on task force members individually to provide their vote. Then announce whether the motion carried and the count of the vote. When the chair calls for public comment on an item, individuals participating via Zoom should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. The raise hand function may appear in different places on your Zoom menu depending on the device you are using and which version of Zoom you have. Individuals will be called upon by name in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. When you are called on, please unmute and state your name. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. When the chair calls for in-person public comment, individuals should raise their hand to indicate they wish to speak. Staff present will direct you to the podium to speak, following social distancing and safety protocols. Please state your name before speaking. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. So meeting is called to order. So first order of business is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. So if there are no objections, will somebody make a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Sammy Turner. I move that we approve the minutes from last meeting.
There a second?
I would
This
second.
is Rachel Reed. I second.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So Sammy Turner has moved and Rachel Reed has seconded a motion to approve the minutes. Do we need a roll call vote on this, Bobby?
Yes.
Oh, great. Bird, you want to start? You got to unmute yourself.
Aye.
Oh, you got to say your name too.
Oh, Burdette Loomis, yes.
Would you like for me to call roll
Yeah, that'd be
for
great.
you? Okay. Jim Carpenter?
Yes.
Eileen Horn,
Yes.
Dustin Stumbling Bear,
Yes.
Rachel Reed,
Yes.
we got Burdette, Hugh's not here, Bonnie Johnson,
Yes.
John Wilson's not here, Ursula is running late, Sammy Turner.
Yes.
Okay. That is all.
Okay, so the motion to approve the minutes has passed. So let's go on to agenda items. First agenda item is the discussion on roles and responsibilities of the four-year directly elected mayor. As we have learned, 70% of council manager cities have directly elected mayors, four-year terms, very common. And so we'll just be joining the crowd on this one, but let's see what kind of roles and responsibilities that we want. So what we'll do is Bobby is going to help us here, and she'll read each item and then poll each person, record the results, and we'll see how it turns out. So, Bobby, you want to start us off?
Just one comment question before we start. So we are talking about a mayor who is directly elected, but is a member of the commission. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen on this spreadsheet.
We created, and I'll record the votes on that. Okay.
Oh,
Can everybody see it?
yes, I can.
Okay. So the first question is presides over meetings of the governing body. So I'll just call roll and you can answer yes or no or undecided. So John Nalbandian.
Yes.
Sorry, okay. Jim Carpenter.
Yes.
Eileen.
Yes.
Dustin Stumbling Bear.
Yes.
Rachel Reed.
Yes.
Burdette Loomis. You're muted.
You're muted.
Yes.
Okay. Hugh Carter sent me his because he was going to be gone, and he said yes. Bonnie Johnson.
Yes.
And then John Wilson, I have his as well. He said yes. I have Ursula's as well. She indicated yes. Sammy Turner.
Yes.
The second question. Staff consults the mayor as it develops meeting agendas. John Nalbandian?
Yes. Yes.
Jim Carpenter?
Yes.
Eileen Horn?
Yes.
Dustin Stumbling Bear?
Yes.
Rachel Reed?
Yes.
Burdette Loomis?
Yes.
Hugh Carter indicated yes. Bonnie Johnson?
Yes.
John Wilson indicated yes. Ursula Minor indicated yes. Sammy Turner?
Yes.
All right, the next question. Initial point of contact for staff and governing body matters. John Nalbandian?
Yes.
Jim Carpenter?
Yes.
Eileen Horn?
Undecided.
Dustin Stumbling Bear?
No.
Rachel Reed?
Yes.
Burdette Loomis?
Undecided.
Hugh Carter was yes. Bonnie Johnson?
Undecided.
John Wilson is yes. Ursula Minor is yes. Sammy Turner?
Yes.
Facilitates governing body in creating a shared vision. John Nalbandian?
Yes.
Jim Carpenter?
Yes.
Eileen Horn?
Yes.
Dustin Stumbling Bear?
Yes.
Rachel Reed?
Yes.
Burdette Loomis?
Yes.
Hugh Carter was yes. Bonnie Johnson?
Yes.
John Wilson was yes. Ursula Minor is yes. Sammy Turner?
Yes.
Facilitates governing body and strategic planning. John Albandian,
Yes.
Jim Carpenter,
Yes.
Eileen Horn,
Yes.
Dustin Stumbling Bear,
Yes.
Rachel Reed,
No.
Burdette Loomis,
Yes.
Hugh Carter is yes. Bonnie Johnson,
Yes.
John Wilson is yes. Ursula Minor is undecided. Sammy Turner,
Yes.
provides annual State of the City address, i.e. where we were, where we are headed. John Albandian,
Yes.
Jim Carpenter,
Yes.
Eileen Horn,
Yes.
Dustin Stumbling Bear,
Yes.
Rachel Reed,
Yes.
Burdette Loomis,
Yes.
Hugh Carter is yes. Bonnie Johnson,
Yes.
John Wilson is yes. Ursula Minor is yes. Sammy Turner,
Yes.
represents city in ceremonial role or invites an alternate within the commission. John Albandian,
Yes.
Jim Carpenter,
Yes.
Eileen Horn,
Yes.
Dustin Stumbling Bear,
Yes.
Rachel Reed,
Undecided.
Burdette Loomis,
Yes.
Hugh Carter was yes. Bonnie Johnson,
Yes.
John Wilson was yes. Ursula Minor is yes. Sammy Turner,
Yes.
represents city or recommends to the commission an alternate governing body member in regional or interjurisdictional meetings groups. John Albandian,
Yes.
Jim Carpenter,
Undecided.
Eileen Horn,
Yes.
Dustin Stumbling Bear,
Yes.
Rachel Reed,
Undecided.
Burdette Loomis,
Yes.
Hugh Carter is yes. Bonnie Johnson,
Yes.
John Wilson is yes. Ursula is yes. Sammy Turner,
Yes.
after consultation with governing body members, appoints governing body members to subcommittees or task forces. John Albandian,
Yes.
Jim Carpenter,
Yes.
Eileen Horn,
Yes.
Dustin Stumbling Bear,
Yes.
Rachel Reed,
Yes.
Burdette Loomis,
Yes.
Hugh Carter is yes. Bonnie Johnson,
Yes.
John Wilson is yes. Ursula Minor is yes. Sammy Turner,
Yes.
after consultation and commission approval, appoints residents to advisory boards. I found a list here. John Albandian,
Yes.
Jim Carpenter,
No.
Eileen Horn,
Yes.
Dustin Stumbling Bear,
Yes.
Rachel Reed,
Yes.
Burdette Loomis,
Yes.
Hugh Carter is yes. Bonnie Johnson,
Yes.
John Wilson is yes. Ursula Minor is yes. Sammy Turner.
Yes.
Okay, on this next one, there's 3 choices. I'll read off the 3 choices and you can let me know 1, 2, or 3, and I'll record them as 1, 2, or 3. Directly elected mayor voting responsibilities in commission business, votes as a member of the governing body, only votes in case of a tie or undecided. John Nalbandian.
Only votes in case of a tie.
Okay. Jim Carpenter,
1.
Eileen Horn,
1.
Dustin Stumbling Bear,
1.
Rachel Reed,
2.
Burdette Loomis,
3.
Hugh Carter was a 2. Bonnie Johnson,
1.
John Wilson was a 2. Ursula Minor was a 1. Oh, I don't know what I just did.
Hit control home.
Thank you.
Control.
Ah, there we go. Thank you. I was doing so well. Okay.
And you learned how to correct it. Well done.
Okay, Ursula was a 1. Sammy?
3.
I think I'll go up here. Okay. That is all of the questions. I'm going to see this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bobby. So, except for the last question, correct me if I am wrong, but it looks like there's either unanimity or clear consensus on all the items except the directly elected mayor voting responsibilities.
John, I would say that given the fact that there are 3 undecideds and 1 no on point of contact, I think I think that's certainly, has some should be discussed. There's some contention there.
Okay, so we'll talk about that, and then we also have to talk about the directly elected mayor voting responsibilities. Are there any other items that that people want to talk about?
I think, this is Jim Carpenter. I think it would be helpful to actually hear why people were undecided or said no on each one of the ones that we don't have all yeses on, because I don't know. I have one that I'm not sure if I'm on the same page as everybody else, so I'd like to hear a little bit about it. And some of the others, think there might be some ideas that others haven't thought about.
Okay, then who wants to, those of you who are undecided or said no on initial point of contact for staff, actually, why don't we hear from Craig first on this one? Craig, the way I'm thinking about that is that it actually would make it easier for staff if they knew that on matters that affected the governing body as a whole, that their point of contact would be the mayor. I'm assuming that if there are individual questions that staff has of, individual council members, that this would not eliminate that possibility. But would you weigh in on this, Craig?
Sure. City Manager Craig Owens. I would say that would be, I think that's quite an important power that would be bestowed on them, on that person. I mean, I'll just say it very plainly. I think it's important as a city manager. I very much appreciate having relationship with all of the governing body members, and that while it is more burdensome, I think it's really important that I have access, that there isn't any screening, there isn't any translation. That's basically the main job of the city manager. I would further say that while some of my colleagues, especially traditionally, really, and there are some charters that are very clear saying that all matters will come through the city manager from any governing body member. I think there are many of us who are not quite as entrenched in that and expect and encourage relationships between, say, department directors and governing body members on various issues. So I would just, if we're documenting this and kind of the language that's used here, I would be very wary of anything that reduces my ability to have a relationship with all of the people that I'm serving. I would say that also for the agenda, but you were all completely in agreement on the agenda, so.
Okay, other thoughts on this?
Eileen.
Hi, Eileen Horn. Craig, I just had a clarification question. So the way it currently functions is that where you and department heads can talk to any member of the commission as needed, or are you, since I didn't get a chance to work with you and for you, how does it work now? Maybe if you can tell everybody, that would help us.
Yeah, City Manager Craig Owens. Right now, and again, my career, during my career, I've gotten a lot more comfortable with having help in the space, the gap, some would call it, of where the elected officials are, and as the complexity of running the operation, sometimes I just need the help. And especially if you would get, I've served as many as 15 elected officials in one city. You can imagine that that would be difficult for me to maybe field all of those. So right now, as it is, there are many questions that I ask department directors to address with the elected officials and vice versa. And in general, when an elected official right now wants to have that interaction, they generally talk to me, not always, but generally do. And I do ask that the department directors or any staff member keep me apprised of what kind of contacts there have been, just so I'm aware of what's going on.
This is John Nalbandian. I think what Craig is saying is actually pretty common among city managers. Wouldn't you say, Craig? I mean, the idea of, and I did not interpret this as limiting department head working with individuals. I mean, department head working with individual governing body members or you, as a matter of fact. But if that's the way that this is being interpreted, then I'm going to change my vote. Because I want what Craig said is that's what I want to endorse.
Yeah, let me just add to that, as someone who comes at this not from an executive perspective, but from a legislative perspective. The idea that you could be an elected official and not have direct contact seems at odds with the practice across legislative bodies. And I think that as long as it's within reason, and I'd associate myself with Craig's remarks 100%, that I think that respects the individual commissioners, and allows them those contacts, and so I just think that from the perspective of the commissioners, I think they would feel restricted in the way that question, as I read it, and I read it differently from you, John, was formulated. But I think Craig did a great job of talking about how this works on the ground.
Bonnie?
Yeah, I put undecided because I didn't know how to interpret that. And I was leaning towards interpreting it as that everything had to funnel through the mayor. And I was concerned about that just doesn't allow for a very nimble organization and doesn't allow for, like what Craig was saying, of like a department head having to, contact a commissioner or to discuss something. And so I just wasn't sure how to interpret it. And if it is interpreted as that everything's funneling through the mayor, then I would vote no. But if there is another alternative, another way of thinking about it, then I'm open to hearing what that is. Thanks.
This is John Nalbandian. I work with a lot of city managers in a lot of cities, and I actually have never come across a city of our size, at least, where all communication was channeled through the mayor and the city manager. I didn't interpret this as with that meaning, but if that is the meaning, then I would be strongly opposed to that idea.
I'm going to remind everybody that you need to state your names. Even though I call your names to speak, I need you to state your names. So Rachel, you were next.
Yes, this is Rachel Reed. I voted yes with the looking at it as, for example, Craig, the city manager, needs to talk to somebody on the commission. He will notify the mayor. I'm talking with Courtney Shipley. He'll notify Finkeldy. I'm talking with Shipley about this, so that Finkeldy knows what's going on. That's how I interpreted it. I didn't interpret it as a funnel or a a gooseneck or something like that, where everything has to go through the mayor to the members of the commission.
But this is John.
If that's how it's interpreted, that everything must go through the mayor, as opposed to, hey, I'm talking with so-and-so, here's your info copy. But if everything has to be funneled through the mayor, then I definitely want to change my vote also.
Jim.
You're muted, Jim.
Yep. Sometimes it doesn't go off the first time you do it. Jim Carpenter. I think I was undecided on this. So, and that's kind of the reason, I don't think any of us, from what I'm hearing, are in favor of all communications going through the elected mayor to the commission from the city manager, or the other way around. I think we want open access. So, it all comes down to the wording, because right now we have ambiguity here in interpretations of this simple phrase. So I guess we're going to have to flesh out just what it is that we're all have a consensus about and come up with some good language for that to substitute for these, quick sentence here. And given what Craig said, now I'm undecided on the agenda too. Because Craig, as I understand it, there is an agenda meeting each week between the mayor and you. And is the vice mayor also included in that?
City Manager Craig Owens. Yeah, that's how we're currently doing it.
Yeah, and I also, for the agendas, I don't want to keep individual commissioners from suggesting or presenting things on the agenda because it has to be funneled through the directly elected mayor. So both of these, which are intense interactions with the city manager, I think in my mind, we need to have language that opens them up to all commissioners can have that communication, and what information is shared with the mayor or vice mayor, I assume would all come out at a final agenda meeting to decide what's going to be in the published agenda for that meeting. So it's more complicated than just these easy sentences to me.
This is John Nalbandian. We're making it complicated because we're not familiar with practices that are common in council manager government. It's very common for a council member to propose something for the agenda. I mean, that would I mean, you'd if I wanted something on the agenda and I was a council member, I'd call the mayor, I'd copy the city manager on it. And, if it didn't get on the agenda, then when it came time at the actual meeting, when we go to other items, I would bring that up. These things, they don't, I don't know. I mean, the formality of the language, I don't know. I mean, the practices are very common here. I mean, I don't know.
John, Jim Carpenter again. Then I would suggest that we look for a way to adapt our language to reflect what we understand as the common practices in Lawrence. Because if we have simply initial point of contact for staff in governing bodies is, the role of the mayor, that's really contrary to our current practice. So I'm just suggesting that we look at those, just as you're saying, and come up with language that reflects what we have here that we value.
Okay, we can sure do that.
Sammy.
I'm sorry.
Sammy's had her hand up, and then I think Eileen, do you still have your hand up? And then Dustin does as well.
This is Sammy Turner. I just want to say I agree with a lot of the sentiments that people have said, especially Jim. I guess I would have just interpreted this as like, if there's an issue, the mayor is the first point of contact, but not as like they are the gatekeeper for all information and all communication for anyone. So I wonder if we're looking at rephrasing this language, if we could say like, specify that city manager can have direct relationship and communications with all members of the commission, but first point of contact in most case scenarios is the mayor, or something more eloquent than that.
Eileen.
For Eileen Horn, I just wanted to, I agree with the sentiments expressed, and I just wanted to give an illustration. So when I was hired as sustainability director, it was a brand new position in the city and the county. And had the county administrator and city manager at the time not encouraged me to go around and meet with all of the elected officials, I couldn't have been nearly as effective. I mean, we couldn't have done, because you have to sit there and you have to hear what their passion is and understand how you can support that as a staff member, and what levers you have as a staff member within local government. And so I think it would do a disservice to staff at all levels to not have access to all the commissioners. And so I just wanted to provide that illustration.
Dustin.
Hi, Dustin Stumbling Bear. So the reason I voted an outright no was the ambiguity, and that all of us could have a different interpretation of it is something I foresaw. And any one individual can choose to use ambiguous wording to their advantage and possibly to the city's disadvantage. And as something I just kind of wanted to point out, Mr. Nalbandi, I'm not making an accusation against you. I just wanted to point something out. You talk about common practices, and that's a phrase being used around a lot by white people in America to describe policing, to describe housing practices, to describe housing prices, to describe employment practices. And it's always to the advantage of certain groups of people. So to me, I'm listening to that as a low-income individual, and I'm just like, yeah, but who benefits from those common practices? And let's just be mindful of that in this particular situation, that me reading that says you want the community and you want the staff to only go through one person. And let's be mindful that at the state and national level, we want to be apolitical on our city commission. That's fine. But we exist as part of this world in which things are happening around us. And we have had unscrupulous individuals recently at the state and national level use ambiguous language to their advantage and to the nation's and state's disadvantage. So that was just common practice. And it's hurt a lot of people, including people of color. And I just would ask that we be mindful of that. Again, I'm going to reiterate that point again and again. It might be common practices, but who's benefiting from those common practices? And I would just say that it might seem like we're getting complicated, but as Mr. Carpenter said, this is who we are as a community. We care, and we want to have access to our elected officials. We want our elected officials to be able to talk to anyone in the government that we come to them with an issue about, who we're most comfortable with. And that might be one official, that might be Mayor or Ananda, that might be Commissioner Ananda, that might be Commissioner Larson, that might be Commissioner Boley, whoever. But we should be able to feel comfortable knowing that we can come to those individuals and know they're going to be able to talk to anyone in the government on our behalf. And I felt like that wording really took that power away from the community, away from the elected officials, and away from the staff. That's just my opinion.
Burdett Lewis, I really take that very seriously, Dustin. Again, I'd come back to my view of the commission as, in part at least, a legislative body, and we're going to talk more about representation, but that is representing both the entire community and different elements, whatever, within the community. And you want those voices to be heard. And so without directly addressing the common practices notion that you bring up, and I understand that, but I do think the more we consider the commission as a body that represents the community at large, and also parts of the community, and making sure that as a legislative body, it can bring issues from the community to the attention of the entire commission, to the mayor, and to the city manager, that's an extremely important part of what we are about here.
This is John Nalbandian. How about we ask, we see, is there a volunteer on the task force who would work with Craig to come up with a more descriptive, more of a description for the two items. Staff consults the mayor as it develops meeting agenda and initial point of contact for staff and governing body members. Would somebody work with Craig to try to develop some language with that? Jim?
Jim Carpenter, yeah, John, I'd be happy to take a stab at that and possibly call in one or two other people to get their input before we bring it back to you. Especially, I'd like to hear from Dustin. We have some final, and because we can talk up to a couple of people as long as we don't daisy chain it. So.
Okay, this is John Nalbandian. So unless I hear an objection, Jim will work with Craig and they'll try to develop some, and they will develop some language that elaborates and maybe is more specific on items 2, where the staff consults the mayor as it develops meeting agenda and initial point of contact for staff and governing body members. Okay. All right, good. All right, let's see. Let's
Well,
go.
can I jump? This is Bonnie Johnson. I had my hand up. I just want to jump in before we move off of this. I mean, I think what we're seeing is that our experience has been with a council manager form of government that does not have a directly elected mayor. We don't have experience with a directly elected mayor, and we're running into the limitations of our knowledge in this area. We don't know. And so yeah, we need to collect some more information about how does a directly elected mayor work in a council manager form of government, so that we can understand what these things mean.
This is John Nalbandian. That's what was in the document that I sent you some time ago, which was my informal survey of city managers, asking them what are the benefits of a directly elected mayor. Out of that information and our subsequent discussion came the list. That's how that list came about. So, okay, so let's see. I would like to move on now to the directly elected mayor voting responsibilities. Votes as a member of governing body, votes only in case of a tie, undecided. So we need to talk about this because there's a lot of difference.
John,
Yes.
This is Bobby Walthall. We had a member of the public raise their hand. Do you want to go ahead and take public comment on it now, or?
I'd like to wait until we get through this one.
Okay.
And then, so we'll be able to open it up.
Okay.
This last one, what it has to do with the focus we want to put on the mayor's role and the power or influence that we want to give to the mayor. If the mayor votes as a member of the governing body, that clearly is a different sort of status than only votes in case of a tie. Only votes in case of a tie presumes that the mayor is facilitating the meeting, and that's a primary responsibility, and then will only, vote. Now, that doesn't mean that the mayor would not weigh in on issues as any other council member would. But this, to me, has to do with how much focus do we want to put on the mayor's role? Okay, other comments?
I just wanted to, so I voted, or I indicated that I was more comfortable with the mayor voting as a member of the governing body. And I had two reasons for that. One is, John, I really liked the language in one of somebody that responded to your inquiry that the mayor could be leading a team of equals. And I thought that, ensuring that the mayor is voting and considering everything with the commission and required to vote with them kind of fosters that. My other thought was just a little more cynical and political, which is if they're never on the record voting, how do voters know where they stand? And it also kind of gives them this out to be like, I don't know what that crazy council or commission is doing. I wouldn't have done whatever. Like it gives them this out where they're not truly like bought into the voting and decision making, or like responsible to the voters that way. And so I thought in terms of fostering a team feeling and also just the on the record need for voters was really critical.
Let me talk. So I was going to think, initially I thought, well, I would really like to go to 6 commissioners, 3 elected every 2 years. And that's another question, of course. But I think, and so my thought was, if it's 3 every 2 years, then the mayor is the 7th commissioner. In a tie, she or he could vote to break that tie. But I think Eileen's perspective here is convincing to me, that you want, if he's going to be or she's going to be the focal point of a city government and is a part of the commission, that person should be on the record on various issues. Now, I do think that the mayor, with a committee chairman in Congress, would get to have the last vote. And so the vote would go, and if it's 4-3, 3-3, the mayor's vote would be determinative. But I hadn't really thought completely about that, Eileen, and I think that's important, and so I think the mayor should have a vote, whether it's a 5-person commission or a 6-person plus a mayor commission.
Sammy.
This is Sammy Turner. I originally was undecided because, I thought, it kind of depended on if we had an even number of commissioners or how many we wanted. But I think the argument that Eileen made was very convincing about, how we need to have them on the record and not just have the mayor and the commission be divided, but instead be working together.
This is John Nalbandy, and I agree with what Sammy and Burdette said, and I would change my vote. You want to try to vote again on this one? Let's do that. Let's vote again and see, and we'll see how convincing Eileen has been.
Pretty good, I think.
This then is okay.
Do you want
Bob, can you call the roll again on this question?
Yes. Do you want me to share my screen again, or just tab it without sharing?
Why don't you share the screen? That way anybody is looking.
Okay. Hold on here. Oh, hold on. Okay. Oh, I can't see it. There's too many things open. Okay, yeah, I just couldn't see it. Okay, so we're doing the directly elected voting, mayor voting?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So the questions are, let me get my sheet here. Directly elected mayor voting responsibilities. Votes as a member of the governing body, only votes in case of a tie or undecided. John Nalbandian.
1.
Jim Carpenter.
1.
Eileen Horn.
1.
Dustin Stumbling Bear.
1.
Rachel Reed.
1.
Burdette Loomis.
1.
We'll leave Hugh. Bonnie Johnson.
1.
Ursula Minor. Do you want to leave it at 1?
She must be muted.
Yes, I'd like to leave it at 1.
Okay, thank you. Sammy Turner.
1.
Okay.
This is John Nalbandian. I think that's more than a consensus. So let's go with that one. And then so votes as a member of the governing body. So then before we can actually adopt this, we need to review the second and third points with Craig and Jim. Will work on and bring us something back for the next meeting. So now let's invite public comment.
Okay, hold on here. Let me get my screens back. Okay, it was Christopher Doutry. I'm sorry if okay, sorry about that. You have 3 minutes.
And you're muted right now.
Christopher, there we are.
There he is.
Are we there?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I ducked into an alleyway. I think it's a moot point now because we were talking about the mayor and his powers and such. My point before you guys voted, it's kind of a moot point now, but couldn't the mayor be on record by voting and have it non-binding? That was my point that I was trying to make before you guys voted. So it's kind of a done deal now, but there is no reason that the mayor couldn't be on record, not as a participating vote, but as a non-binding member so that we could understand what the mayor-elect would have voted if he was, a voting member. So that was my point, but it's a done deal. So I apologize for wasting your time.
No.
Thank you.
But that was my point. I mean, there's certainly, you can certainly have to voice your opinion in a binding way without a non-binding vote. Does that make any sense?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Who else do we have here?
I do not have anybody else.
Can I ask one question? Have you guys gone on to district elections yet or no?
No.
Okay, well, I'll come back then, and I appreciate your time. I will sign off if I can actually figure out how to operate this.
No, why don't you, if you have some thoughts on that, why don't you just tell them now? Because we're going to move into that right away.
Okay, my thoughts about district elections is I've seen it in several cases whereby district elections really give representation to folks that typically don't have them. And when you have an at-large election, typically the money interests, they kind of win all the elections. And I'm not saying that it's anything malicious, but I am saying that folks that don't have the economic means, it would be nice if you had district elections, so thereby you would have folks that would be able to call somebody and say, hey, this is happening in the neighborhood, instead of calling downtown where no one's really, they're not really, I don't say liable, but they're not really, joined to the hip at that community. And if you had a community member that was elected to that district, it would make it a little more fair for the distribution of funds and services And I've seen district elections work really well. And it kind of lifts the whole town up, because with district elections, you have a community that may be a little downtrodden and they get more funds and services from the city. And then other people from maybe more wealthier communities, oh, look at this. They have stores now and they've got transportation and the roads aren't so bad. And it really kind of lifts the whole community up if you have representation at the district level. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay.
I hope I can turn this off somehow.
We can turn it off.
Okay, just turn me off. Turn me off.
Okay, so let's go on to the discussion of district at-large elections. We'll start with, we'll ask Professor Loomis to summarize the memo that he wrote for us as a way of getting started. You're muted, Bird.
I'm going to do something a little different. That you've got the memo that lays out a lot of my thoughts, and a lot of the literature is very ambiguous on this. And I think in a town the size of Lawrence, without large minority populations, with a spreading out in many ways of various minority populations in one way or another, it's not clear to me that districts or at large will make that much difference. I came into this thinking it would make a larger difference than I thought. But let me just talk a little bit about representation. And I mean, the first thing when we think about representation in a place like Lawrence, the question is, do we want to have single member districts, individual districts, the way Mr. Doherty was just talking about, or do we want at-large elections across the city? I know there's a couple of other hybrid models, but let's try to keep it simple right now. And do we have an elected mayor or not? Because I think that's important as well in terms of whether we want, it's a consideration. An elected mayor obviously is elected by everybody. So those are the two things to start with: single member districts, or do we have an at large? If we have single member districts, then each member has to think about their representational responsibilities. Are they being elected and then they are, in political science we call it, are they a trustee? You give them their responsibility and they make decisions. They consult with their constituents, but you're hiring them, you're electing them to use their judgment. Or are they delegates from that district? Again, much as Mr. Doherty, I think, was pointing out or arguing, that they would reflect those constituents. And that's within the big legislatures, the US Congress, for example, the House or state legislatures, that's a real issue. It's an important issue of how people determine their styles. In reality, there's always in single member districts, there's always a combination that members, legislators, or commissioners would go back to their district, but they're also thinking about the city as a whole. You have to. I mean, it's almost impossible not to, or to think about and use their judgment, because certainly all their constituents can't know everything that a commissioner knows. So that's a single member district. If you have at-large an at-large commission, then individual commissioners represent the entire city. Now, that doesn't mean, and we've seen this, I know we all have a sense of certain members of the commission may well either actually or be perceived to be representing some kind of faction some of the time. And I mean, I'm been part of the Old West Lawrence Association for many, many, many years. I'm sure there are sometimes we think, oh, say X or Y is more favorable to neighborhoods than another commissioner. We might go to that person. So just because you're elected by the city doesn't mean that you might not have some constituencies within that city. But again, I think that these are difficult to get at empirically, specifically a lot of times. And I do think members of the city commission who are really perceived as representing one group or another end up being less effective than those who represent the city as a whole. And as I noted in the memo, I really think members of the city commission, by and large, not every one, have done a really good job of thinking of the city as a whole. You might not the first couple months you're in, but after a few months, you realize that the problems facing someone on the east side or the west side may well be problems that face the entire city. So all I'm saying there is that I think that even an at-large commissioner could represent particular interests. There's another way to think about this, and that is, does the commission as a whole roughly represent the community as a whole? And again, we can talk about that, but this is something called collective representation. And I think there are people who think their voices aren't heard, and that is absolutely both possible and probable. But generally speaking, does the commission reflect the community as a whole? It's really hard to get at, particularly if you don't have broad polling data and stuff like that. But it is a way to think about it. Are these 5 or 6 people on the commission, generally speaking, representing the community as a whole? The mayor, an elected mayor, would represent the entire community, of course, and so I think that that how the mayor would work with district elected officials or at-large officials could make a big difference, particularly if the mayor would facilitate things. Finally, there is something called descriptive representation. And that's something that Dustin was getting at in his comments earlier. And the question is, has the commission descriptively reflected the community as a whole in terms of its racial, ethnic composition? Gender is certainly an issue there as well. I'd say on gender, between the county and the commission, that over the last decade, gender representation has been more than adequate descriptively. In terms of minority communities of whatever sort, one of the recognitions we have to have is that Lawrence has a relative, I don't have every number here, has relatively smaller minority populations. So even if you go to districts, the likelihood is that unless you go to, had 20 districts or something, that you're not going to get easily a lot of minority representation in terms of ethnicity or race. So if you look at the memo, my overall perspective here is that we can have lots of discussions about this. But I don't think we can assume, as Mr. Doherty did in his earlier presentation, that districts will actually work the way he lays it out. Indeed, I would think that if you look at the commission representation over the last 10 years, you would see not so much differentiation by race, but certainly in terms of economic status. I think that commissioners have been from a wide variety of economic statuses. And so I think we have to be careful about making assumptions about various implications of district versus at large. And the last one I would make is that his argument was, it's kind of a straw man here, but that economic interests dominate the city commission. The people with money support people, and I think there's very little empirical evidence that that's the case over the last 10 or 15 years in Lawrence. And in fact, used to be that there's a lot of discussion about the Chamber of Commerce candidates versus the neighborhood candidates. The Chamber of Commerce candidates have basically pulled out of commission elections for the most part right now. So as we go into this discussion, I think we really have to be aware of making easy assumptions about one system versus another, particularly as it applies to Lawrence, Kansas.
This is John Nalbandian. Thank you, Bert. I have a few comments in addition to what Bert said, but I want to lay out, like we have about 20 minutes, and I'm just seeing that we're at a very beginning stage on this issue. I know that we don't have a lot of meetings left, but this, we're not going to be able to decide something right away on this issue. When we look at council manager government, while there is clear consensus about directly elected mayors, there seems to be clear consensus on 4-year terms for council members as well as mayors. There is no consensus on at-large versus district or combinations. I looked at Olathe, Lenexa, Overland Park, Shawnee, and then I looked at university towns, Iowa City, Iowa, because that's one of my favorite cities, and also looked at Manhattan, and it's impossible to generalize. I've also played with data a little bit, and as Bird said, on demographic data, we are not very diverse. When it comes to the idea of trying to draw districts, I mean, drawing districts presumes that there's a contiguous area that has a common interest. Well, if we had 6 council members all elected at large, that would be 17,000 people. So think about, when we think about the differences in this community, I think about, well, East Lawrence has interest, North Lawrence has interest, West Lawrence, there's West Lawrence. I don't have a clue how you draw the districts. That's not our job. So I think we have to look at this. Let's have just sort of a general discussion at this point, but then what I want to end with today is what information do we need that Craig and his staff might help us with to inform where we want to head on this. So let's just have some general discussion here about how people are looking at this issue. Who wants to get us started?
Sammy.
This is Sammy Turner. First, I really appreciate the memo that Burdette put out and all your comments and stuff on that. One of the things that I guess I'm thinking about when looking at large versus district delegates is when we think about how many people, like state house candidates represent, county commissioners or state senates represent, it's like state house represents, about 25,000 people, county commissioners, I think about over 40,000, state senate over 75,000, whereas at large Lawrence City commissioners represent over 100,000 people. And constituent services already at the state house level is very difficult, and there's a lot going on there. I think currently members of Lawrence don't have a direct point person to go to in the city council if they have an issue. There's no one, that they know that they can go directly to. It's like all 5 of them represent every single one of them, which also makes it really hard for the council members to make direct relationships with such a vast variety of people. So I think, at least personally right now, and I'm really excited to hear about other people's, interpretations of viewpoints on this, is I think my ideal situation would be we have maybe like, 4 X amount of districts, and then maybe 2 or some other number of at-large members, because I do think there is value in both types of representation. But I definitely am feeling a lot more solid towards having at least some sort of district representation for that constituent service reason.
Jim, and then Rachel.
I want to join Sammy and say thank you to Burdette Loomis for the memo. I think it's a great place to start. And it just also pointed out to me that I would like more information. I'm not dead set one way or the other on whether we have districts all at large or a combination of both. I like the idea of thinking about districts and at large and the directly elected mayor. Would just point out that Kansas statute requires that if we do districts, we have to have a minimum of 4 districts in the city. So as we start talking about numbers and whether we recommend expanding the number of commissioners, if we decide districts, we have to have at least 4 of those and then figure out how to get to an odd number through the rest. I would like to see information, if it could be collected, articles on that compare and contrast these methods, the 3, the hybrid, all at large, or all districts, and just what the experience of some other communities have been with that. John's provided us in the agenda packet 13 different topics that he provides some great thoughts, experiments for what would happen with some of these that are past decisions. What would have happened if we had had districts? What would happen for other things? I think if we had some more information that everybody could read and we went through some of those, I think would help flesh out people's ideas and thoughts as we start to develop our recommendations. But that would be after we have more information, I think.
This is John Nalbandian. Jim, I think that is a great idea, but it doesn't exist. I mean, that's okay. The problem. And the little information that we do have comparing districts to at large, the differences are minimal. So I mean, we're not going to be able to get a bunch of literature that is research based. It's more theoretical and anecdotal.
Jim Carpenter. I know, John, I just kind of Googled difference between district and at-large city council elections today. And one thing that came up is California, every city's pretty much being forced to go to districts, but that's because of a more inclusive and restrictive California Voting Rights Act. And, we aren't dealing with clusters of minority populations like they are. But I did find that some of those city websites, some frequently asked questions that kind of went through just somewhat whether the differences are, because we're a lot of us are starting from scratch. What does a district mean? And as John, as you said, we won't be drawing districts. That would be the purview of the legislative body. So the city commission would do that eventually. But what we can do is, if we decide to go that way, is come up with some considerations, what kinds of things we would like to be considered when deciding on how to draw lines for districts. So, I'm just looking at, what are some of the values of each? And I think that's where your 13 points really come into line. Some of those, in my mind, are definitely, those are citywide issues, and some others have a disparate impact in certain parts of the city, which may or may not have an adequate voice on the city commission. So I think it would be worth going through that after we just had some basic definitions down, some thoughts and ideas to have a conversation around.
I had Rachel and then Dustin.
You're muted, Rachel.
Okay. It's unusual. I'm usually very outspoken. This is Rachel Reed. I'm more in favor of a hybrid model where we've got X number of districts that are defined. And then we have, and that ideally should be an even number. And then we have an even number of at-large commissioners. Because I feel that, you're in your neighborhood, you've got a commissioner who understands your neighborhood. And so you want to be able to talk to your commissioner who has a similar experience or a similar background rather than an at-large. And the reason for that is depending on who runs and depending on where they come from, what part of the city, you might have someone from East Lawrence, someone from South Lawrence, maybe 2 or 3 people from East Lawrence, and no one from West Lawrence is represented. So what the districts will do is it will bring the different parts of the city together, and then the X number of at-large will represent everyone.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Dustin?
Hi, Dustin Stumbling Bear. I think districts in this city are going to be one of those things, like we all wanted it at first, but then when we got it, we hate it. And I think that's what districts will turn out to be for a lot of voters who think they want it. But going on what Rachel was just commenting on, again, I ran for office. I knocked doors 8 hours a day, 6 days a week for 6 months. I listened to people in East Lawrence talk about how the people in West Lawrence have all the influence on the city commission. I listened to people in South Lawrence talk about how people in North Lawrence have all the influence on the city commission. I listened to people in West Lawrence say that about people in East Lawrence. I listened to people in North Lawrence talk about East Lawrence and West Lawrence having all the city commission influence. I think districts will have a kind of polarizing effect at first. People will think, oh, all right, we're going to get ours. And then when they'll realize, as we've already said, what people who are on the city commission, I believe it was Burdette Loomis who said it, after a few months, they realize, no, you got to take care of the whole city because everybody's taken care of. When individual parts get their piece, the whole city as it gets better. And I think there will be some polarization at first, but I also think it could serve in accessing people who are lower income. Again, you're saying that there aren't noticeable effects, but you brought up the point earlier, Mr. Nalbandian, of a district of 6 districts would bring it down to 17,000 people. Yes, 17,000 people, but in reality, it's the voters you're trying to turn out. And that voter, it's about 25% of the actual population in Florence. So it's not 17,000 people you got to convince, it's now 4,500 you got to convince versus 16 to 18,000 people you got to convince. And that's where the money comes into play for those who can raise it versus those who cannot, and getting your name out there through paper ads, through radio ads, however it may be. And so I could see it helping lower income people be able to access, as well as people who might rent and think they can't get that influence. They don't have the time to get out there and get that influence. So I can see a positive, but I see negatives. I'm kind of against districts, to be honest. I like the at-large model. You really get to know the whole city. You have to know everyone. You have to represent everyone. So that's kind of where I lean at. But I thought I'd share some other thoughts on it.
Ursula has had her hand up.
Ursula Minor. I am leaning more towards districts. I agree with what Sammy was talking about, where, you know, you have a few commissioners and you have the large population in Lawrence, and Lawrence is growing. If they have a concern to get at that small amount of people, I don't know if their voice will be heard and really represented. I've heard a lot of comments about numbers, how many minorities are in Lawrence where we're living, where minorities are spread out. You know, there's no clusters or anything like that. I feel like if there was districts, no matter where anybody was spread out at, it would give more people a voice. You know, if they're living north, east, west, or wherever. But I believe a person would be more apt that probably was quiet or wasn't represented to talk to a district person versus trying to get a hold of a commissioner or something like that. But I'm leaning more towards districts for that reason. That I do believe that no matter where people are spread out at, that it'll just give more people a voice, whether they're minorities, low income, or whatever their situation may be.
Anyone else, Bobby?
No.
Any public comment on this?
Well, Bonnie just put her hand up.
Oh,
yeah, sorry. I was fumbling with the switch here. This is Bonnie Johnson. I like the Ursula's comments just now about the, you know, feeling comfortable about who you could talk to versus trying to contact everybody on a council that was elected at large. In urban planning, we do an exercise often where we ask people to map out their neighborhood or map out where there are edges to their neighborhoods that they don't cross. And those edges don't actually have to be anything like a wall or a highway. And you discover things, particularly about Lawrence, where there are people in West Lawrence that never go downtown, ever. And then there are people that are like, oh my gosh, you don't go downtown? I'm always downtown. So there are these different experiences of Lawrence depending on where you live. And so it might not be an ethnic or race grouping. It is simply where you're comfortable living in Lawrence, and you maybe don't get to North Lawrence ever or South Lawrence ever. And so it may be more of districts that it's simply the location and where you have the most experience in that you're comfortable with. And thus I like the idea of a mix of at-large and district for that. So you get the big picture, but then you also get where people run from particular districts that then people know this is the person that's from my district that I can contact.
This is John Nalbandian. There was a city, I don't have it offhand, but there's a city in Johnson County where they have what Bonnie was talking about and what Ursula was talking about. They have two, I think they had 2 at large, and then they had 4 districts. And the districts, they clearly were not sort of deliberately drawn. It was just like 4 quadrants of the city, like just draw a square, and they just, and so that the representation, it was just the idea of having someone you can contact in your area, rather than saying, you know, this is a discrete minority population. How about, let's see, a bird, how about you and I, maybe Bonnie, I don't know, do some, a little searching of some websites or literature, and maybe just come up with some basics on what is a district, what is at large.
Building off what Jim said earlier, I mean, I'd encourage, I'm happy to work on that with you, but I haven't seen those California studies, for example. We certainly have to have very close to population equality. That is a fundamental district requirement. Beyond that, I think is close to what John is saying. You know, contiguous districts. You know, no particular gerrymandering. And I don't think people have a gerrymander. I don't know how you gerrymander. I mean, I know what you do here, but I think that I'd be happy to you know, to go a little further and put stuff together. But I go back to what John said. I went into this thinking there would be far more academic studies than there are, and there just aren't. And I also went in, I've always been a pretty big at-large advocate, and I've come out of this being very agnostic on districts versus at-large. I would say, and this, I don't want to go too far here, but if we're going to go to districts, I'd go to all districts. I think Sammy's point is very well taken. If you want to get this kind of representation and say have 6 districts, then go to the smallest number of people that you can, so you can have that contact. But those are all things. I go back to, I'm agnostic, and I think it's a great conversation to have about this. I would say, though, if we have an elected mayor, we have the chief executive or the chief executive / council member who does represent everybody. So that would be something to take into account.
Okay, this is John Nalbandian. We're at 7 o'clock, and I'd like to bring this to a halt. Maybe everybody could volunteer for a homework assignment and try to do a little bit of searching, Google searching yourself to find out the basics about districts and at-large elections, and then we'll come back next week or our next meeting, and we'll continue this discussion. But we have to at some point come to something tangible that we can actually vote on. So maybe a couple of alternatives.
Hey, if we do, I'm happy to do that. I think it's a good idea, but I think that everyone coming back at the meeting with this would be less than optimum. I mean, if you maybe after a few days send, if you've got some citations, send it to John, to Bobby, and then we can sort of put them together. So we'll have an agenda to talk about rather than just talking.
Good idea. I mean, I think John Nalbandian, that's a really good idea. If any of you do come up with websites or other information, send it to Bobby, and then she can forward it to me, and we'll try to put something together for next meeting as well.
Real quick, look on YouTube.
Oh,
I have actually been watching little videos on YouTube about rank-based voting, and they have some wonderful videos on all of that. And they're just like, some of them are kind of cartoonish, but they're really plain and they're really understandable. So you might think about that if you're looking.
okay. That's John Nalbandian. That's great. Thank you very much, Ursula. I haven't talked about ranked choice voting because I think that the business of district at large is going to consume us. So anyway, so YouTube videos, Google, send Bobby what you come up with, and then we'll try to put something together, a packet together for next time. And we'll just continue this conversation until someone feels willing to take the initiative to make a motion.
John, is Jim Carpenter. When we send things to Bobby, and she forwards them to you so you can kind of put them together, could we also get all the raw material in a packet just sent out to us? And then if you go through and you can kind of come up with some questions or a way to address that, but I would appreciate seeing whatever anybody finds, just so I can increase my breadth of knowledge.
Yeah, we'll put John Nalbandian. We'll put it in a packet. Yeah. Thanks. Okay, can we have a motion? Is there any other public comment?
Chris still has his hand up. I don't know if he's still on the meeting or if he left.
Still in the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, I just, may I speak?
3 minutes.
Okay, it won't even take that long. A couple comments. I was really excited to hear Mr. Burdett say that he was, hey, if you're going to do this, do it all district. One of the things, and I'll be very brief, one of the things that struck me about all the, oh, there I am. Is that me? Yeah, there. So one of the things that struck me about this, everyone kept talking about racial lines and talking about we don't have enough minorities in Lawrence. And that's really not the point of district elections. The district elections are to have representation for people that don't normally have it. And, if I had to put it in a nutshell, it's about poor people not having representation as opposed to people that have wealth and do have representation. So I think it's a moot point. And quite, it's kind of disingenuous to talk about minorities in this and that. We're talking about poor people not having representation on the east side as opposed to the west side. And then there was another comment about, how do we draw districts? And then the person, I don't know who it was, said, oh, we have West Lawrence, we have Old West Lawrence, we have Brook Creek and this and that. And well, you already have that sort of thing. And I think that's kind of the horse before the cart, because district elections are a good idea. And we can figure out district elections later, but district elections are something that represents people who don't have a voice. And it doesn't matter the color of your skin. It matters about your economic status. And people with low economic status in Lawrence don't have representation. And, there was another comment about...
3 minutes is about up, Chris.
Okay, then I want to say thank you very much. That's what I want to say. You guys are all very nice people, and I appreciate you. And I will get you the empirical evidence, the research evidence about district elections burst at large. I will get you that evidence. It won't be from Google. It won't be from YouTube. It will be from Yale. It will be from all sorts of universities. I will get you that evidence, and I'll bye-bye. Okay, sorry.
No.
Okay, can we have a motion to adjourn, please?
Ursula Minor, I move to adjourn.
I second. Rachel Reed.
It's been moved by Ursula Minor to adjourn, seconded by Rachel. Reed, why don't we just have a show of hands at this point? And okay, we will reconvene next time and continue our discussion of district at-large representation. Bobby, thank you very much for helping out tonight. And Rachel, thank you very much for preparing the survey for us. Very nice.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Right.
You all have a good evening.